When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Jaime Lannister in The Winds of Winter. And you guys had a lot to say about Jaime, a lot of questions about the character, of course, because he is a fan favorite, so I understand why. But before we get further into the video, if you did want to become a Patreon or a member, you do get exclusive videos and also videos early. I've been doing all of my House of the Dragon content for the members and stuff like that. So if you are interested with that, before we get into House of the Dragon, and even as we're going into it, I will be doing kind of my more condensed summaries of the episodes on there. So consider that if you want to. And also thank you to people that already support me. So let's get into the video. So I want to talk about some questions that are more about Jaime's character before we get into the actual events for Jaime in the book. So D. Charles has a very interesting question, and also check out his YouTube channel if you have not. He does make fantastic content. Excited to see, what you do with House of the Dragon and all of that. But he asks, I'm beginning to assume Stoneheart and Jaime may be a bit anticlimactic in a sense. I think Jaime may be pushed into another oath or promise to serve Lady Stoneheart in a way that ultimately contradicts Golden Hand the Just. What do you think? Hypothetically, what immoral oath will Lady Stoneheart impose on Jaime, or is this too ridiculous to contemplate? So, I think Jaime is going to be, in a sense, forced to help with this Revenge Red Wedding, or Red Wedding 2.0, whatever you want to call it. He's going to be forced into a situation where he's going to have to go along with it. And this is going to be detrimental, right? Jaime is going to lose family if this is to happen. It seems like Devin Lannister is probably going to die if this does occur. I think Jaime's going to be forced in a situation where there's no real win here, right? Either on one hand, if he doesn't go through with it, he's probably going to get himself, Brienne, killed, and that's not good. But on the other hand, he's going to have to break his own certain morality and perform actions that are not to what he believes in. And so Jaime's in a situation where it's a lose-lose situation, and I think that's going to be important for the story, as that kind of wrap up with Catelyn, Brienne, and Jaime kind of ends, even though it's not really Catelyn anymore. I think that's what we're going to be pushing towards with Jaime in the future. Ashley asks, what do you make of the theory that because Jaime lost his hand, he's detached from Cersei, but until she loses a foot, she'll remain attached to him? Since that's how they came into the world, Cersei first, with Jaime holding her foot. I've always found it so interesting. So I think it's a nice metaphor. I don't really think there's any real physical stuff there in terms of oh yes, they're Cersei is actively connected to Jaime because of all that. I don't think so. I just think it's a nice little metaphor towards, they'll probably die together, I think, and the way they've been so connected throughout the entire story. And now you have Jaime who, has disregarded Cersei, right? Cersei sends a letter to him for asking for help because she's been in prison and all these things, and Jaime disregards it. He's coming into his own, right? He's the leader of the Lannister army. He's kind of taking over the role of the head of the Lannister armies, and he's becoming a commander, something that Tywin would have loved to have seen. It just took a while to get there. And so I think Jaime is completely severed that tie from Cersei. Now, I don't think it's the end of those two together. I think we'll see one or two more scenes with them together. But I think for Cersei, she is in a different spot because Cersei is surrounded by people that do not have her best interests at heart. She's being used by countless numbers of people. And so she's still holding on to Jaime and using him, trying to mentally abuse him and all this stuff that she's been doing for years and years and years, because Jaime represents to Cersei a part of just herself, right? Because the two looked so similar, Cersei, I think the real reason she liked Jaime is because she is this egotistical, selfish kind of person where she sees herself in Jaime, and that's why she likes him. Now, it's even gone a step further. If you look at the character of Cersei, some people have even implied she really doesn't care about her children either. It's just because she sees herself and her children. She sees that selfish part of herself in her children because of the way they look, that she cares about them more than maybe she would if they didn't look that way, which is interesting. I've never kind of thought about it that way, but I just thought it was something interesting to add on to kind of what you were talking about, Ashley. Metal Maz also asked another good introductory question for Jaime in this book, in Winds of Winter. But Jaime has always been controlled / influenced by others. His father, Cersei, King Aerys, his vows as a knight, his vows as a Kingsguard, his vow to Catelyn. Do Do you see his story ending with him forsaking everything, reclaiming his agency, and leaving to find his own path? I think that's kind of where Jaime has been on, and I think Jaime is one of those characters that will die in the story, not in Winds of Winter, probably. Well, if he dies in Winds of Winter, it'll be the very end, but I don't know. That's a tough one to predict. We'll kind of get there when we get there, because Jaime's plotline, I think, does kind of overlap with Cersei's plotline towards the end of the story, or towards the end of Winds of Winter, I should say. But I will say I do think he's a character that's going to go through with his own path. I think he's someone that's going to try and do what he thinks is right. And whether that's going off of certain parts of the Knight's vows or certain parts of the Kingsguard vows, I think he's going to decide which of those vows hold value to him, right? When is it right to do one thing and not the other, right? In terms of like protecting the innocent while you're breaking other vows. I think Jaime is going to be a character, and this is what his whole arc has been about, and I think it starts really in, Feast for Crows and Dance, where he is taking liberties into his own hands and doing what he believes is right. And so that is where I think Jaime's going to go with in terms of being controlled. I don't think he will be controlled anymore. We've kind of seen him already growing, and we have another comment. There's another comment I have on Instagram that's also kind of interesting because it kind of plays off that really nicely. But I think Jaime's in a position where he's not really growing as like he's changing as a character, but he's growing in terms of continuing to be this character that he's grown into, And so that's kind of how I'll answer that question. Wheezy asks another pretty interesting question. Do you think the fandom holds Jaime in the proper regard? Do you think he's morally better than he is, worse than he is, or do they have him right, or do they have him about right generally? I think the fandom holds him pretty correctly because he's not a perfect character. He's not like the quintessential good character. He's not like for instance, like an Arthur Dayne or a Barristan or an Aemon the Dragon Knight. He's a much more complex character, which is why he's one of the best characters in the story. And I'm doing my top 100 Song of Ice and Fire characters, and he is, I'll just say, very close to the top, if not the top. And so he's a character that has made very good actions, in terms of saving people, but he's also done some really bad things, sleeping with his sister, fathering these bastard children that have caused wars. He is someone that I think the community understands quite well, that he's a morally gray character, but he's also like leaning towards bettering himself in the story right now. So he's like leaning good, but he's a gray character based upon his actions and things that have gone on in the past, where he has good deeds, but also pretty bad deeds as well. Wheezy also asks, why didn't Tywin pressure Robert to move Jaime from the Kingsguard after the sack of King's Landing? I think there's a couple reasons. One is the Lannisters were not really in a position during Robert's Rebellion, at least, where they should start demanding things, right? You got to remember, Jaime was being threatened by Ned to be either sent to the Night's Watch or killed. So the fact that also Tywin would have tried to present some situation where he has Jaime off of the Kingsguard breaking another oath, it wasn't the right time, I think. And I think Tywin would have been working at trying to get him off of the Kingsguard after that point. But during the sack of King's Landing, and right during that early stages of Robert, taking over the throne, I don't think it was the right time to try and put that forward. Nick asks, what are the possibilities of Jaime being one of the three heads of the dragon? I think very low, because you're basing that idea more or less off the idea that Aerys was Jaime's father, if I'm reading what you're trying to say correctly. And I don't really subscribe to that idea too much. I don't like any of the Lannister children being Targaryens. I just think we have too many characters that are rumored to be Targaryens at this point, and I think all of them play a really good role in the Lannister family and dynamic, so I just don't really think that would be a possibility. And I think if any of the kids are a Targaryen, it's probably Tyrion, but I don't think Tyrion is one as well. You also asked, do you think he has already fulfilled his role in the plot, or will we have a big impact on the events that lead to the end of the series? I think that he still has a role to play in the plot, and a number of reasons. I think he's going to be a vital part of the Red Wedding 2.0. I also think that he has a major role still to play with Cersei, and maybe trying to convince her to stop the war as she's losing control. Young Griff is about to take the city. The populace is turned against her. I still think he has a role to... and I'm still always been split on Cersei's fate, because a part of me thinks that she dies when Young Griff takes King's Landing. It seems fitting. She's made all these bad decisions that have led to someone like young Griff being able to take over. She's turned the populace against herself. I think it would be kind of cheap if she escaped, to be honest. I feel like it's a natural ending point for her to die to young Griff. But if she does that, I also think that Jaime should also be with her. I think the two should die together in that poetic kind of ending. But then at the same time, I think maybe it makes more sense because Jaime seems like he would be a character that would be fighting the others, and that's not going to happen until Dream. So I'm still very conflicted on where I feel like Jaime and Cersei specifically are going to end out. I don't know if it's going to be in the end of Winds of Winter or, Dream of Spring, kind of the way the show did it, where they're kind of like the very end of the show. I don't know. I still think, regardless, though, Jaime still has a lot to do in terms of plot. His story is definitely not over. Dom asks, do you think he and Brienne will actually make a plan to save Pod and beat Lady Stoneheart? I don't think they will have a plan to actually overcome her. I think they'll have a plan to escape. I think they will both survive. I think their plans will be more on self-preservation than they will be on beating Lady Stoneheart. I think in this situation, Lady Stoneheart will prevail in terms of taking out the Freys at this wedding, and I think her downfall is going to come from Arya. I talk about that all the time whenever Lady Stoneheart is brought up and her end of her fate, but I do think that we will see Brienne and Jaime be able to overcome the situation, get out of there, and this is not where they will end. You also asked, do you think Jaime may have misplaced feelings on Brienne? I don't think so. I think Brienne has shown that she is a character that has been a very positive influence on Jaime, part of his, coming back into the light and good side of Jaime. I personally find that the two have good chemistry in terms of friendship. I don't think, and this is another question I think that was asked, is I don't think there is a love between the two characters in terms of romantically. Even in the show, I found it quite weird. I don't really feel like Jaime and Brienne in the show had romantic chemistry. They had very much like good friend chemistry, but I might be wrong on that. Also, Larissa, you asked that question, so that was me kind of answering it. I think good friendship with Brienne, not romantic, at least as of right now. I don't think there's been enough to give us this indication of it being kind of a romantic type thing. Dell asks, possibility that Jaime faces Brienne in trial by combat if Stoneheart demands a trial for Jaime. So Jaime would not be fighting Brienne. I just don't see that happening. I don't see the end point of either one of these two characters happening here. I think they just have a bigger role to play at, and so putting the two together means one of them would die. And so it would be a tragic writing, right, where the two maybe refuse to kill each other, or maybe one has to kill the other because, they still have some bigger role to play. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think if Jaime is going to have a trial, and it's a trial by combat, I think Brienne will step in for Jaime, and then that would be interesting, right? Like, who would Brienne go against? Would it be one of the Brotherhood Without Banners? Who would it be? Would it be Thoros? It's interesting because I think you're onto something, but I don't think it would be Brienne fighting Jaime necessarily. Ryan asks, will Jaime kill Stoneheart? Don't think so. He could be involved in a situation in where someone is able to get to Stoneheart, or maybe he is a reason why the Revenge Red Wedding doesn't go perfectly. But I don't think he'll have, this moment where he kills Stoneheart. I see why you would think that, given his tie to killing the Mad King, but I don't see that happening, unfortunately. Cam, you also asked something about Jaime and Brienne's relationship, but I personally just don't see it happening in the book, unless there's more development in terms of developing them romantically. I just felt like the show kind of forced that. I don't know if I'd call it, I guess I'd call it fan service, because I think a certain part of the fan group wanted them to get together. I just didn't feel like, especially from Jaime's side, in terms of Jaime viewing Brienne, I don't feel like Jaime ever viewed her that way, and there was no real indication. Of course, with Brienne, there definitely was. Like, there's a scene in season 4 at the Purple Wedding where Brienne, is talking to Cersei, and Cersei asks, you love him, and Brienne's kind of just like, doesn't say anything, and then just kind of walks away. So there's definitely, like, on Brienne's side of things, there's definitely that build-up, but for Jaime, it doesn't really feel like that was ever the case, in my opinion. Ian asks, how much changing is left for him to do? I feel as his story will focus on proving change, not undergoing more. And I completely agree. I kind of talked about this earlier on in the video, but Jaime has kind of changed to the point now where he's gotten rid of some of his bad influences. He's kind of turning into his own man who's trying to be better and trying to grow. I think now it's about, what you talked about, his actions. What is he going to do to uphold, his ethics and his morality, and trying to be a true knight, trying to value the people and keeping peace and fighting for the living in terms of the other's threat. So yeah, I think you're spot on with that idea. And yeah. Matthew asks, where will he be at the end of the book? Back in the capital? He's one I can see going anywhere. I think Jaime's in a weird spot because, again, I think Jaime could make it back to King's Landing by the time young Griff attacks. I think it could be very closely tied. Like, Jaime gets back right before young Griff does, or gets to the capital, and so Jaime is maybe able to convince her that you need to flee, or we can't stay here, and maybe Cersei's not listening, is trying to blow up the whole castle, and so we get that turn again, where it's Jaime having to kill Cersei because of what she's doing, in a mirror, and really nice mirror to the past with Aerys, and Jaime could also die in this situation. So I think a likely situation is that Jaime is at the capital at some point in the next book, but where he's actually at by the end, whether he's dead, whether he's going back to Casterly Rock, whether he's leaving, whether he's a prisoner of young Griff, a lot of it's left up to interpretation, and I think it's very unclear as to where he'll be by the end of the book. Maz asks, do you think he'll get revenge on Zolo the Fat for taking off his hand? I think he definitely can. It's a little, suspicious that the character has not really been mentioned in a while since the Storm of Swords, outside of Jaime just kind of remembering him at Harrenhal and trying to get revenge on him because he can't get his revenge on Vargo Hoat because he's already dead. So I think that definitely it could be a possibility that he definitely runs into him at some point and is able to kill him. But yeah, I think the simple answer is yes. Taylor asks, do you think Jaime will have any involvement in the Red Wedding 2.0? I kind of mentioned this a little bit already, but yeah, he definitely will be. I think his major involvement will be he has a lot of information. He's the commander of the Lannister forces. He knows a lot about the inner workings of the Frey Lannister alliance. He'll have access to being able to get to pretty much anywhere. So he's definitely going to be used as a tool to try and infiltrate this wedding and perform revenge for Lady Stoneheart. The one who could asks, will Jaime save King's Landing again during the Long Night? I don't know about the Long Night. I think if he's going to save King's Landing again, it'll be based upon preventing Cersei from blowing up the city in terms of how Aerys was going to do. So I think that's what we'll see if Jaime's going to be in that type of situation. User asks, do you think there will be an epic battle between Jaime and Sandor on one side and the Mountain on the other? If Bran's fever dreams come true, there were shadows all around them. One shadow as dark as ash, with the terrible face of a hound. Another was armored like the sun, golden and beautiful. Over them both loomed a giant in armor made of stone. But when he opened his visor, there was nothing inside but darkness and thick black blood. Bran 3. I don't know where we would see that happen. And also the Jaime fighting the Mountain. Jaime's just going to die. He has no combat that would even get him close to the Mountain. So if anything, it would be like the Mountain and the Hound fighting with Jaime just there. So I don't know. I definitely think we will see maybe the Hound and the Mountain fighting at some point. But in terms of like Jaime actually having this epic battle as well, I don't know about that one, user. But that is all the questions. And again, if your question was not answered in here, it might be because, you submitted it after I recorded the video. I took a lot less time with this one because I have a lot of work to prepare for next week. So I recorded this only about a day after I put out all of my posts for asking for questions. So if yours is not on here, I'm sorry I didn't get to it. But always the next video. And let me know if you guys have a certain character you want me to do down in the comments. Let me know. I did this one based upon, I remember a comment hearing that somebody wanted me to do Jaime in the last couple of ones. So if you do have one you want me to do, let me know in the comments. If you see one that's somebody's already commented, like that one. But yeah, I'll see you guys all in the next one. I'm really excited for next week for House of the Dragon. I have a lot of videos that I'm going to be doing. I have a lot of videos I'm featured in on other people's channels. I have a lot of streams I'm going to be doing, also streams on other people's channels. So it's going to be a very hectic ride next week. So bear with me. A lot of content's going to be coming out, and I hope you guys all enjoy. Excited for it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.